All right, next week we have Dr. Copelia Velez. At the end, there is still a lot we can do. Nobody wants to die alone at an old age in intensive care. While we are healthy and totally aware, we can decide on our own in which way we want to be treated at the end of our lives. We must avoid the creation of false hopes which lead to futile life support, which results in unnecessary expenses for medical care and hospitals, in many cases causing pain and suffering without providing a basic quality of life. If we take the right decisions today, we can die with dignity in the future, and we will all die someday. Many expect this moment to be kind of romantic, that we'll close our eyes and not wake up again. This may take active management to achieve. Unfortunately, Dr. Velez, Dr. Copelia didn't have a bio, so I did what anyone else did. I looked at Google and found someone with her name. This may or may not be her. No, I believe it is her. I think she is an anesthesiologist in Guadalajara, one of the big university hospitals in Guadalajara, and she's also an expert in pain management. But very interested next week. Now, we're on to this week's presentation. Has anyone, I'm sure I'm going to be stealing half of presentation, but has anyone gone to see the butterflies in, yeah. When you're walking up there and you see the first butterfly, you go, oh look, a monarch, and all the people walking down smile. You know, like, you wait. It's incredible. Many have misconceptions about monarchs, Mexico's monarch migration, including where they go, what they do when they're there, and when the best time to see them is, and why their forest is in danger. Today you will not only hear about how to see butterflies, but also how to help them, as monarch conservation must be radically re-envisioned if this fragile phenomenon is to survive. When Dr. Ellen Sharp first saw the monarch migration in 2011, she fell in love, both with the butterflies and with her guide. In the years... did you know about this? This is her husband. In the years since, she and now husband Joel Moreno Rojas have launched JM Butterfly B&B, an ecotourism business in Joel's hometown of Macheros in the state of Mexico, as well as created the forest conservation non-profit Butterflies and Their People, which employs 6 full-time forest protectors in the Cerro Pelón Monarch Butterfly Sanctuary. Please give a very warm and safely distant welcome to Dr. Ellen Sharp.
Okay. Oh, it is. It's on. You can hear me. I can really hear me. Ooh, okay. So I handed out the little slip. We sent out the little email. You guys, are we all on the same page on your cell phone? Oh, yes, it is at macheros.com/OC. OC stands for Open Circle. And on that web page, the one that worked for me, the top one was too slow, the blue hyperlink on the bottom of the page, I got that one to open up pretty quickly. So is everyone there? Because I didn't know how to talk about the majesty of monarch butterflies without showing you some pictures, and so I was trying to figure out a way to do that when I wrote to Open Circle and heard, well, it's very bright, projection won't show, so I wanted to try this, so you can follow along with the images on your cell phone while I talk about them. So is everyone there? Yeah?
If not, I can go around.
There's a little slips of paper with the address, which is Macheros, macheros.com/OC for Open Circle. So Macheros is actually the name of the village where we live. It means stables. We live in what used to be the stables of a big hacienda. They kept the horses and the mules very far from where they actually lived, but that's, a little bit of the history of our town and why that website is called that. It's a word that you'll hear again in my presentation. Okay, is everyone, yeah, are we on the same page, literally? I like this second one because it's like a film strip that you can scroll up.
Website?
What?
What is the internet website?
Oh, do you need passwords for here? If you can't get it over your, okay.
Is it a Facebook page?
No, it's a website, Macheros.com. How many people do have this? Oh, okay, that's the majority. I'm going to start talking very slowly then, and then hope for everyone else you can get it open. Okay, so let's see. What did I want to say too? Oh, Phil already introduced Joel. I am here with my partner Joel, who's my partner in many projects that I'm going to talk about today. And in our division of labor, Joel's in charge of the infrastructure, really, as Loretta discovered. He's very good at it. You know? And I'm in charge of communications usually. As Joel says, you know, I do the talking. So I'm going to do a little bit of the talking today, but I did want to let you know in the question and answer and the discussion, I hope that we have time for Q&A after. We love answering questions. That Joel will be happy to take questions as well. Okay, so on the slideshow, if you scroll up to the first screen, I first just wanted to talk briefly about what the Monarch Migration is. I have to say, when I came to see the Monarch Migration 10 years ago, the same day that I met Joel, I knew absolutely nothing about it. So there were actually, here I have this, it's a gray page with the map that says Monarch Migration. There are two Monarch Migrations, or there were two Monarch Migrations in North America. One that's east of the Rocky Mountains, which is the one that overwinters in Mexico, and another one that overwintered within California. That one went extinct last year. It got so little publicity, so little fanfare. I was kind of surprised by that. But when volunteers went out to count the monarchs in their overwintering roosts, they found less than 2,000. Everything with like wildfires, climate change, Central Valley pesticides, that seems like functionally extinct. We still, yeah, right? And then so little press, which kind of alarmed me for the Eastern migration. So we still have the Eastern migration. The numbers have dropped a lot, but it still exists. So that is east of the Rockies here, the butterflies that are born in northern North America. So southern Ontario, or some of them now. Actually, it's right now. If you want to scroll down, this gives you the where, to the red dot where we live down there. But the next slide shows the generations of monarch butterflies, because part of what's amazing about this annual migration of monarch butterflies is that it's multi-generational, that it takes them at least 3 to 4 generations to pull this off every single year. So right now, as you see where we are in August, actually the butterflies that we will see here, that we will host here in Mexico, are already being born. The super generation, they can live up to 8 months. And so these are the butterflies that will fly up to 3,000 miles down to the overwintering grounds here in Mexico, hang out for the winter in our forests outside of our town, and then they remigrate. The same butterfly remigrates to probably Texas. Sometimes they get blown a little farther north, but mostly Texas. Looks for milkweed, lays eggs, and then that's it for this generation. And they pass the baton to the next generation, which is a very rapid succession of reproduction. The next generations only live about a month over the summer periods until the August, September rolls around and the super generation is born again. So going to see the monarchs is really amazing, but also just understanding the biology of the monarch migration is part of what really adds to the wonder of the experience. Okay, next slide, or scroll down actually, is a map of where we are. So this is actually something that's a little irksome for us. The state of Michoacan has a very, well-funded, active, organized, competent board of tourism, and they have really branded Michoacan as the place to see butterflies. We live in the state of Mexico, and actually 2 of the 4 sanctuaries that are open to the public are in the state of Mexico. So it's something, oftentimes even people who stay with us will be like, how are things in Michoacan? It's like, well, actually we're in the state of Mexico. Admittedly, when we look out our windows, we look at mountains in Michoacan. We are that close. But because we live in the state of Mexico, there are a lot of services from the state of Michoacan that we don't have because we're on the edge of a state. We don't have cell phone signal. We don't have Wi-Fi. because we're like sort of in this hinterlands. So it makes like a big material difference to us that we're in the state of Mexico. Although we do have Wi-Fi now, thanks to Joel creating the infrastructure to have Wi-Fi. Joel built the towers to bring us internet, but we don't have cell phone signal. So for future reference, you can WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger us, but no phone calls. So looking at this map of the sanctuaries, you can see where they're just roosting right on this mountain range, right along the state line there. The 4 that are open to the public are Sierra Chincua at the north there. Sierra Campanario, just to confuse things, that's El Rosario, which is the like most well-publicized, most visited of the monarch butterfly sanctuaries. Most organized tours go there. Going down, Cerro Pelón, this is where we live in the state of Mexico. The entries are in the state of Mexico, but the mountain itself straddles multiple political jurisdictions, including the state line. And then Piedra Arada, down below, which is much closer to Mexico City and close to Valle de Bravo. So all the other 3 sanctuaries get a lot of visitors because they have more publicity, because they're more accessible. El Rosario used to post, or kind of boast in like their Instagram account that they had 8,000 visitors in one weekend one time. I was like, oh my God, 8,000 visitors. We get 1,000 visitors in one entire season. Not one weekend, the entire season, November to March, 1,000 people. So it's a very different experience to come see butterflies on Cerro Pelón than it is in the other sanctuaries. Okay, now scroll down to the next screen. I just wanted to show you where we are in relation to where we are now. Here's a little road trip Joel and I took yesterday. It did actually take 6 hours with Joel driving. Might be 7. I would say it'd be nice to like break it up with like a little, a little trip to the Morelia Pátzcuaro area if you do decide to come our way. We're not super close, but there we are, right across the state line in the state of Mexico. And if you keep scrolling down, here is our village. This is what our village looks like from the scenic lookout on the little mountain behind our house. You can see, it's a very small town. It makes Ajijic look big, right? It is maybe 350 to 400 people, 100 horses, at least that many dogs, It is a small town, 80% cousins. 80% of them are named Moreno. 80% of them are Joel's cousins. When I hear Joel's calling Primo, I'm like, I have no idea who it is, right? It could be one of 100 people. So it's small. But unfortunately, on the top of this slide, the mountain that's cut off, like on the top of the screen, this is where the butterflies go. That's Cerro Pelón right there, which is the entry is right to the right of the screen, and you go up the mountain to see butterflies there. Okay, my next slide.
What's the elevation in town?
The elevation in town, 7,400 meters, and the butterflies are up at 10,000 feet. I'm sorry, feet. Yes. The butterflies are at 3,000 meters, and we are at what, 2,400 meters. I have been stuck between those two systems, right, through my US education. So scrolling down the screen, this is just a shot of lively downtown Macheros, taken from our rooftop with a little church in the center of town at sunrise, just to give you an idea of what town looks like. And then I wanted to talk just a little bit about what the local economy is. My next slide is of avocados. This is actually Joel's Avocado Orchard. Actually, if you want to go down one more, my slides got switched up here, that shows a cornfield. We used to be a major corn producing area, as did a lot of rural ejidos in Mexico, right? Like the rural ejidos were producing the corn for domestic consumption in Mexico. But then, when NAFTA was signed in '94, part of what happened is that a lot of cheap, subsidized corn imports started arriving from the United States, which really, undermined the domestic corn economy. So people still grow corn. This is Joel's parents' cornfield, but it's not really very profitable. It's more like people do it because they've always done it. It's kind of a hobby. It's a nice thing to do, but it's not really, people can't make a living at it. Which is why I have this slide, and then the slide of avocados, which is what's happened. A lot of these cornfields have converted to avocado production. And there's been a lot, I don't know, I think like in the Q&A, if you guys are interested in talking about this, there's been a lot of press that avocado production is bad for butterflies, you should boycott avocados because it's hurting the monarch migration. But I think in some places that is true, but on the ground it's just way more complicated. So we'd be happy to take questions about that, about avocado production. And because actually a lot of members of our community and members of our family are smallholder avocado producers. Okay. The next slide is us. So I talked a little about what, the Monarch Migration, and where, state of Mexico, and here's our who. So 10 years ago, I went to see the Monarch butterflies. I was blown away by seeing the monarch. I knew nothing about it, and then just to see like millions of monarchs flying was really amazing. I was in the middle of writing a dissertation about conflict and violence. I'd just been living in a small town in Guatemala where the older generation was beating up the younger generation, and it was horrible, right? So I was in kind of a dark place, went to see butterflies, and it just kind of really, it was a life-changing experience. It is for many people, but maybe more dramatically for me, because I was like, what am I doing? I don't want to be an academic and like talk and theorize violence. I actually just want to look at butterflies, you know? So it was kind of a process, though. If you go to the next screen, there was a period of time when I was living in Los Angeles, finishing my PhD at UCLA, and like, you know, calling Joel every day. And we started a business together while we were long distance dating. The website I bought was JM Butterfly B&B.com for Joel Moreno because I didn't think that I would ever live there or be part of the business. It was a little short-sighted on my part. And then by the time I did live there and I was running the business with him, we were already listed in Lonely Planet, and it was really too complicated and too late to change. But that's the story of our name. And that was in 2012. And if you scroll up, here's what our place looked like in 2014 when we first opened. So Joel lived on Long Island for more than 10 years. Actually worked in the nail salon doing mani-pedis, which is why he learned excellent English. His brothers who worked in landscaping don't speak nearly as much English as Joel does. So with that money, he built this house. We opened the B&B. Joel already had a house, 3 bedrooms, shared bath. That's how we got started. So this slide, 2014, and if you scroll up, this is what it looked like by 2020. We just kept expanding. You know, we added a 3rd floor, we built a 2nd building. If you roll up again there, most recently, a swimming pool, jacuzzi, and this orange building is a yoga studio. So, yeah. So for the first time, kids in Macheros are learning how to swim. Because no one knew how to swim, there's no water nearby. And if you scroll up the next few pictures, I just wanted to show you a little bit of what the rooms look like. The first one is the red room, that's one of our original rooms. The one underneath that is the blue room, with that nice view of the little church in the middle of town. And then the following slide after that, so for 8 seasons, we gradually became more popular. Every time we made money, we invested in expanding and building more. And then, well, you know, the pandemic happened. And for a whole last season, we were closed. The other 3 sanctuaries were open to the public, but ours was closed because our local authorities decided that it was just too risky to host guests. And most of our guests are traveling from far away. In fact, I'm really happy to be here today because we'd love to have more people who already live in Mexico. Originally, when I first made a website, I assumed most of our guests would be Mexican, but then it just didn't. I made a bilingual website, and in our first season, we had 1 Mexican guest, and it was really kind of like, what's going on? I think that a lot of Mexicans come on day trips, or they're very wealthy and they stay at a 5-star hotel. So it was like, there's kind of like a missing middle class that, you know, we realized that we were serving mostly foreigners, mostly Americans and Canadians who were somehow involved in monarch conservation, usually. But not this year. This year we hosted no one. It was just completely closed. So we very quickly pivoted, and if you roll down to the next slide, to doing virtual tours. We had offered online butterfly experiences. We have a couple of subscribers here today, yay. So one thing we did was a bi-monthly e-magazine that had videos because butterfly behavior really changes a lot over the course of the season. So just to show people the different locations that they go to, the different kinds of things that they're doing at different times of the year. We also had a cultural feature. We did little films about our Posada celebration, a little thing on avocado farming, a little thing on how to make guacamole, like different kinds of features that came out twice a month, 10 issues. Whew, even though we had no visitors, I managed to stay very busy during this pandemic. And it was a lot of fun. And I think, we're going to continue it this season because, it's a little unclear what's happening right now, right? Whether or not we'll be able to host people. But if you roll down to the next slide, we're planning on reopening this year. I just sent out a newsletter to our subscribers about it, saying that we'll be asking for proof of vaccination from our guests. I think I'm going to add the negative COVID test caveat, perhaps. I'm still considering that one. But, I've been living in Mexico for the last 8 years. I've kind of missed what's going on in the United States, and I was a little surprised by the flack that we got. Take me off your mailing list. I can no longer support your business. How dare you ask for that? But, we're a super small community. We have immunocompromised neighbors and workers, and it's just like we got to take care of them. So our plan for the season is we'll mask up indoors, ask for people to be vaccinated, and hang out outside as much as possible, which is why I have these photos just to show you. We do have a lot of outdoor space. If you scroll up, here's our rooftop looking west towards the mountains of Michoacan from the state of Mexico. And if you scroll up again, we already really had a tradition when we're hosting guests of people hanging out outside anyway. We're kind of at a high point in a valley facing like these mountain ranges. On a clear day, you can count 14 of them, and it's this really beautiful view. So already people were just congregating outdoors, and so we will continue that tradition with the guests that we get this year. It's an interesting time, right, with the Delta variant, because I don't know, a few weeks ago we were talking about this with Deborah, like we got a lot of requests for information, reservations, and the last 2 weeks is like, crickets in my inbox. It's like, oh no, what's happening? So scroll up, I have a picture of our secret margarita recipe. Yes, this has been a popular slide. I did a Rotary Club San Miguel de Allende presentation, and this was like the slide that everyone was like, oh. But a lot of people were, were like, I don't know if I want to ride a horse or hike or anything, but give me margarita. So my next slide is I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to see butterflies when you come to Cerro Pelón, because we are one of the entries to the Cerro Pelón Sanctuary. We are a 5-minute walk from the entry. We're a 2-hour drive from the Michoacan sanctuaries, but 5 minutes to Cerro Pelón. So if you scroll up, when you go to the entry, you can meet your horse. We encourage people to take horses. Some people, really love hiking and insist on hiking, but we really encourage, when you're shaking your head, take a horse. Take a horse, that's what I say too. It is, it's quite a bit of an elevation gain. The road is pretty rough. And in part for altitude, that we never know how people are going to respond to the altitude. I've had like very young, fit people get really kind of sick from the altitude, and other people are totally fine, so that's part of it. It's a little easier on the horse. And if you scroll up to the next slide, the other reason that we encourage the taking of horses is that it's a huge support for the local economy. This picture of a bunch of people standing at the entry there, it's not even all of them, that's just some of the people, some of our neighbors who benefit from butterfly tourism because they own horses, they lead the horses up the mountain, or they work as guides on the mountain. So it's just like a way that we support the local economy. I think we ourselves, when we're in full season, we can employ 12 people directly, but the indirect economic effect in our village is really huge when people come see butterflies with the horse handlers, and also just taxi drivers or people who sell souvenirs, different things, food. Okay, so if you scroll up, so after we leave the entry, it's about an hour plus, depending on where the butterflies are, going up the mountain, preferably on horseback. You can do it on foot if you insist. And then, but you do, when we dismount, if you come to the next slide, usually what happens is there's a certain point where it gets a little too steep for the horses, or we don't want to get the horses too close to the butterflies because they'll put dust on them and bother them. So we leave the horses and then we hike the last little bit. So there's always a little bit of hiking involved. So there's a slide there of people hiking through the forest. And then if you scroll up, For those of you who are following along on your phones, are you on the screen with, it's a guy with a yellow hat and a woman with a blue jacket? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see the butterflies? Yeah. Yeah, they're hanging in their clusters there. A lot of times we get to, if it's cold, if it's colder than 55 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 degrees Celsius, for Canadians and Mexicans who are here, they don't fly, they cluster. They're clustered together in this protective behavior for warmth. It's a couple of degrees warmer inside their clusters than it is in the air around them. So a lot of times we get there with people and people are like, where are the butterflies? Because they're effectively camouflaged. They look like leaves. The outside of their wings is the color is kind of beigey, kind of leaf colored. So it can be hard to see. If you scroll up to the next one, there's another picture of them in their clusters. That might be a little bit easier to see because some of them are starting to open their wings. If you scroll up to the next slide, not only do they form clusters for warmth, they also cluster together very tightly on the trunks of the trees. Because especially for an old growth tree, the trees have their nighttime temperature in the daytime and their daytime temperature at night. So it helps the monarchs to regulate their temperature. Which is in part why stopping logging is so important, to keep these trees for them to be able to protect themselves. And if you scroll up one more, there's a really lovely picture taken by Joel's brother, Ranger Pato Moreno. He's a great person to follow on Facebook. As the butterflies are starting to open their wings, as the temperatures warm them. And then, if you scroll on to the next slide, once they are warmed up, they explode into the air. They burst forth into the air, and this is a really amazing thing to see. Something that you don't really get from the pictures or even from videos, unless you have a really good microphone. It's just the sound. The sound is amazing because it's like their wings flapping together. The sounds of thousands of wings flapping together. It's really more of a vibration than a sound, and that's part of what's just so really amazing about the experience. Which is why I think, if you can, you should go see it in person, right? Because it's just incredible. You scroll down to the next screen, this is another picture of flight activity, of being able to stand in a storm of butterflies in this really beautiful meadow that we have on the top of our mountain on Cerro Pelón. And this picture, I want to say, was taken in December. People always ask, when is the best time to come see monarchs? And there's a lot, I think it's because when people confirmed the monarch migration and first started coming in the 70s, in the 80s, the world was a lot colder. And so everyone said, February is peak season, that's the only time you'll see flight activity. Unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately, really, but it breaks 55 degrees, 13 degrees Celsius on our mountain almost every day. You see flight activity throughout the entire season. We see it in November, December, January. But even in this season of Delta variant and COVID, my rooms are booking out for February. Everyone just wants to come in February. They think February is peak season, and it's been very hard to get the news out there that with climate change, that no longer holds. You're just as likely to have a cold, rainy day where the monarchs don't move at all in February as you are in the rest of the season. And also it would help us, and all the people you saw in that photo with their horses, if people kind of space it out, and I think not just really crush the sanctuaries in February, because definitely in other sanctuaries it gets really, really overcrowded, but spread out your visits throughout the year. The following slide is also a flight activity slide. This is another picture. It looks almost like an impressionist painting, right? They're so butterflies. This is butterflies flying down a ravine that connects from the meadow and goes down the mountain. And when they're leaving, this is what they do. This is the butterflies leaving. This is the other thing about February, is that if it's been a hot season, by late February, they're starting to leave. They're starting to move on. So they will be very active, but you will actually see less of them on the mountain, because definitely climate change is kind of messing with their season. Kind of shortening it, but it's not predictable. Okay, if you scroll up, I want to talk a little bit more about other kinds of butterfly behavior you'll see on the mountain. Because they are flying more, they need to eat more, right? So you will see lots of nectarine. I wish someone would do a study of wildflowers and their uses of the wildflowers there, but it does seem like there are a lot of wildflowers in bloom, and you'll see them nectaring to fatten up for their re-migration. And then, the following slide, if you scroll down, This is something about in February, and for some reason it is usually around February 14th on Valentine's Day, oddly enough, they start mating. The thing is, once they start mating, they're ready to go. They're ready to go like lay those eggs once they've had them fertilized. They're out of there. So it's kind of like when the beginning of the remigration is when the mating season begins in earnest. And then scrolling up again, this is that beautiful meadow on the top of our mountain, and the butterflies drinking dew on the grass. You'll see them doing that. You also see them puddling in the mud because nectar, the sugar from nectar is not enough for them to be able to reproduce, to be able to create spermatozoa or lay their eggs. They also need salts and potassium that they get from sucking the soil. So that's another behavior you'll see. And if you scroll up, here is also, unfortunately, something else that you'll see on the mountain, which is clandestine logging in the core protected area, which is always very heartbreaking. It was very frustrating for us because we were taking people up the mountain to see butterflies and then stepping over log trees on the way to the butterflies. Because, well, the forests where the butterflies were discovered were communally held, mostly by ejidos and indigenous communities as well. And they were never really compensated for the loss of that land. You know, it's kind of a sore point. Everyone's like, that's our forest. And that they're not other jobs. There are no other economic alternatives, so when people are really broke, the easiest thing to do is cut down a tree to sell. This is ant logging. It's usually one tree at a time, not like industrial clear cutting, but like pecking away at the forest cover with an axe, usually dragged down by horse. So it just seemed very preventable, right? But the people who run conservation in the monarch butterfly sanctuaries, the next two slides, all these other slides have been our pictures. These are actually, I took off the internet, the next two. So this is, what are the development projects that we do have in the monarch butterfly biosphere reserve? And one of them is reforestation. There are lots of reforestation projects. They will boast, we've reforested however many millions of trees. I just don't think, you know, even if these trees survived, they're not going to be big enough to protect the monarch migration in time, considering the way numbers have been dropping. Another thing is that nursery owners mostly don't live in the area, are mostly elites and outsiders, and so the benefit from the tree purchase doesn't really spread out into the community. So it would be great if someone could start a tree nursery in the communities and actually benefited people there. But instead, the folks that you see here, they work one day a year replanting trees. They get 100 pesos for that. So it's really not like an effective economic development project. So you're like, what are you doing with the monarch butterfly sanctuaries? We're reforesting. It's like, well, Another issue is the time of year. When are they reforesting? Often, I mean, any avocado farmer could tell you you have to plant a tree by mid-June if you want its roots to grow before the rainy season ends. They're reforesting in September, October. It's like, these trees aren't going to survive, and that's fine for the people who own tree nurseries because next year they'll resell trees again that will be planted in the same places. So it's a little disheartening. Next slide. This you can see has a little credit in the bottom. This comes from the Fondo Monarca. This is the other program that was started in the year 2000. So 21 years it's been in operation. This is a payment for ecological services program. Okay. And it gives a one-time payment of $100 a year to people as a compensation for giving up their rights to log the forest. It's only given to a small percentage of the population. In our community, 12% of people are qualified to receive this benefit because they're ejidatarios. So it's not a very effective aid program either. Next slide.
Did you say 100 pesos a year?
$100 about, so 1,000, I would say. A couple of thousand maybe. I think it varies each year. There's an account, it's the percentage, it's the interest earned on like an $8 million investment. So it's whatever the interest is divided up amongst people who have land titled in their name, which is mostly older men over 50. Not many people, so it's once a year. Yeah, it doesn't really work. People need jobs, right? People need something more stable. And so the next slide, which shows Joel and his dad, I was going to say, fortunately for us, we had a model of another kind of economic development project, which was full-time work. Joel's dad worked as a forest ranger in the Cerro Pelón sanctuary for over 40 years. Right around the time the butterflies were discovered, a local elite, he was related to the hacendados, the hacienda system before, His compadre was the governor of the state of Mexico. Lucky for him, he asked his friend to fund jobs for the men of Macheros. There are three to four, kind of varied in the lineup, 3 men at least, who worked full-time as forest rangers on Cerro Pelón since the late 70s, which is unusual in all the sanctuaries. So as you scroll up one more slide, this is what they work for State of Mexico, right? Sepanaf, it's a State of Mexico agency. The right side of the slide where the trees are is the State of Mexico, where they patrolled. Even though they were unarmed and they couldn't give fines to people, just having them stomping around the forest made a huge difference to the forest cover. The left side of the screen is the state line, that's Michoacan. And you can see behind those pine trees, the forest cover is pretty scrubby. Like no one was ever paid to protect that forest. So what we wanted to do, oh wait, next slide. Just to say too, this is a little picture of Joel's family. Joel is one of 10. Even though my in-laws had 10 kids, with this like stable job, they were able to kind of play their investments well enough to send the youngest 5 to college. They're the first college graduates in our village. You know, they themselves only finished elementary school, but I think the full-time job made a big difference for their kids and what they were able to do. So next slide is, we wanted to give more families the same opportunity. So we founded Butterflies and Their People. We started the process in 2016, sent our first workers in 2017 to have full-time paid forest protection. And if you scroll up, here they are. We have 6 workers. I only ever get to take a picture of 5 of them because it's always someone's day off, but here are 5 of them, and someone's day off. So if you keep scrolling up, here's the one whose day off it was. Leonel's missing from that picture. They keep an eye on the butterflies. So when people are there, they're like trying to keep people from stepping on them, keep people from taking them, keep people from yelling at them. And also like just letting us know too, that we always have up-to-the-minute information of where the butterflies are, what they're doing. If you scroll up again, they're there. This is what that beautiful meadow looks like now in the rainy season. They patrol the mountain year-round, even when the butterflies aren't there, to keep an eye on the trees, because basically once the butterflies leave, we never see anyone else on the mountain. It's totally abandoned, but they're there every day, even in the rain with their rain gear and a few little casitas they built to hide out in. So there they are, patrolling the mountain. Scrolling up, they pick up garbage. There's some garbage on the mountain. Religious pilgrims, illegal loggers, reforestation projects. People leave the little black plastic bags that the trees come in. They're picking up 40 years of reforestation project garbage. So they do have a request, if you are going to fund reforestation projects, to please stipulate that the workers pick up after themselves, because that is a major source of plastic waste on the mountain. And the next screen, just to say, the main thing that they do is just providing presence. That the year before we deployed them, there were more than 100 trees cut down in the core protected area on Cerro Pelón, and the following year that number dropped to 18. It has been hard during the pandemic to see that number creeping back up. Okay, thank you. As people in the little communities around Cerro Pelón have been sent home from jobs that they had in Cancun doing construction or Mexico City, that has really hit the mountain hard. So I'm afraid that the numbers for this year are going to be closer to 100 again. So we're trying to figure out what else to do. Oh, what I do want to say about that too is that I was very worried when the pandemic started. Our funding is entirely from individual donations, mostly from our former guests. So I was really worried if we don't host people, if we're kind of off the radar, what happens with our fundraising. And I have to say, it was a really heartening year that way. People didn't forget about us, and we're solvent. We can keep employing our workers for another year. And doing the Adopt a Colony project too, because we donated 15% of the proceeds from our virtual tours to pay people, because everything we earn from this project or fundraise goes directly to paying their salaries. So it's a very low overhead project. Okay, and then just before we go, if you scroll up, this is a photo back in Macheros. This is a photo of our yoga studio. I just wanted to say, kind of comparable to people only wanting to come see butterflies in February is also people only want to come see us during the butterfly season. And I just want to say there are lots of other things to do if you do want to come, get away from it all for the rest of the year. We're even saying, if you want like a technology break, we won't give you the Wi-Fi password. You can pretend, have a silent retreat. So we do have a big yoga studio. If you scroll up, lots of hiking right around us. Here's a trail that's up close to that meadow on Cerro Pelón. So this is like a couple of hours hike from us. It's a more challenging hike. If you scroll up, the picture of Joel looking out over the mountain ranges there. This is a half hour from our house, like outside our door on the little hill behind our house when you walk up. You can look into state of Mexico, looking towards all the mountains around Toluca. And if you scroll up, we have more than 106 bird species that our guests have identified and sent to Cornell eBird. Here's one of the more coveted ones, the red warbler. On the page with the red bird with the little geisha makeup, super cute. And another, and then the next little guy too, the Bumblebee Hummingbird is the following slide, and he has a purple bib that looks like sequins. Super cute, almost like bumblebee size, and does a bumblebee-like mating dance. And these are endemic species that have a very small range, but their range is Cerro Pelón. And as you scroll up right now, here's what we have, mushrooms. These are the Amanita caesaria. Their cousins are very poisonous, but these you can actually eat, A little olive oil, lime juice, salt and pepper. They're tasty, they're kind of fruity. And they hatch out of eggs in the ground, so it's really cool. And then lots of what people will just identify as locos growing in our forest. They're everywhere. I'm like, what's that one? Loco. Don't eat it, loco. I'm always like, how loco? Shut down your liver, loco, or just forget your name, loco. I don't know. There's a lot of possibility there, but it's nice to just photograph them. Okay, and then here's my last slide. This has our websites, the website for our ecotourism business and for our forest nonprofit. Yeah, I think my time is up. Yes.